Howdy folks, Troy with V-Twins, the V8s. I'm back. I'm going to do a new video segment on molding your custom motorcycle frame. A lot of guys talk about molding. A lot of people hear the phrase used. Basically, I'm here to tell you a little bit about it and show you how to do it. So what I have over here behind me is a Sportster frame that belongs to a friend of mine, Bob Zaleski at Untitled Chapter. He's an awesome bike builder, but admittedly, he's not a good body man. He hates to do body work. So I have it here at my shop, and he just wants to clean up the weld areas. Not a crazy mold job like it's all tapered into itself or anything like that. Just kind of clean up the welds and go over the areas. So what I've done is he sent it out, had it all sandblasted up really nice. So I got it set up on my jig in here in my shop, and I've mixed up some body filler. And I've laid some body filler down on all of the joints that he wants to hide. So this is the initial stage of it. So I mix up my body filler, I put it all on all of the weld areas around the neck, the front engine mount, this support piece, all around to where the backbone comes into this rear support here, all around the fenders, around the shocks, any place that you can really see, I put some body filler on. So the next phase of the operation is I'm going to sand this body filler smooth, and then we'll see what we have. This is the first application. I'll bring the camera over and I'll show you what this kind of looks like. So here's where my neck is attached to the down tube. Now there was a big weld that goes right around here, and around here. So all I really did was, you can see up in here, I don't have it quite complete. This is the first application. So what I did was I spread it on here with the spreader, and then I wore a pair of latex gloves, and I took my finger and I smeared the filler all into all the grooves. So now I'll take some probably 36 grit paper and take this down, and that'll be my basis for it. So I'll sand all this. This is all hand work, so there's no magic tool that smooths all this off. It's a piece of 36 grit sandpaper in your hand and just kind of like having at this. So every area here will be hand massaged, if you will, to blend all this together. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get out some 36 and I'm going to sand all these areas down, and then I'll come back on camera and I'll show you where it is there. This process is going to take probably 2 or 3 applications to get it to where it's ready to be primed. So I'm going to go ahead and go off camera. I'm going to do that and I'll get back with you. Howdy folks, Troy with V-Twins, the V8s. I'm back. I'm going to get into the next process of our frame molding that we have here. So what I did before was, the frame was, just to recap a little bit, frame was sandblasted. I applied my plastic body filler to all the joints. Now what I've done is I've done my first sanding. The back half of it I just roughed out a little bit. This here I got roughed out pretty good. Here you go. So this is where my neck is, and this is where my down tube and my backbone tube is coming in. I got a little reinforcement here. I got my front motor mount here, and then I got my wishbone down here. As you can see, where it comes down and in, you can see the body filler, and it just kind of smooths everything over. All it really does is it just blends it in. It's almost like if you ever seam sealed anything. It's the same idea. It's just going to smooth it all over, make it look like it's all one piece. Kind of like the way your finger comes into your hand. Same kind of principle, you know. It just blends it in nicely. So now I've got my first sanding. I'm roughed in. I'm going to take and put some polyester glaze coat over these areas to take care of my little depressions and my pinholes here, and then I'll do a final sand with probably 80 grit. This here I sanded with 36, and it's looking pretty decent. As you can see, everything's kind of blending in pretty good. My glaze coat will take care of some low spots, my pinholes, things like that. I'll come around to the other side. I'll show you what this side looks like. You can see that. I'll clean this up. This is where the tank mounts on, but you can see how it's kind of blended in. Right here, if you look, you can see I'm a little low, so I'm going to have to bridge that over. I can do that with my glaze coat. This is looking pretty decent. I got a little digger there. I mean, you just got to, you know, pinholes, you just got to really kind of look it over. I got this front motor mount area here. This back here, what I did was I took my little cookie on a die grinder, and I just kind of knocked off everything, all the rough areas. So now this is what I started out with back there. So I'm going to take and sand this by hand with 36. It's the only way to do it, and that'll give me this kind of a look that I can do my next step, which is glaze coat. So how to do this. So I'm going to continue sanding the rest of this, and then I'm going to apply some glaze coat to all these areas. My next sanding, I'll use 80 grit paper, and more than likely at that point, I'll be pretty close. I'll probably have to go along, look at some little areas, touch up here, touch up there. I'll bring you back on so you can see that. And then once we get it all so it looks really good, then it's anti-corrosive primer, and then a catalyzed primer surfacer, and then we're pretty much ready to do some painting. But, howdy folks, Troy with V-Twins to V8s. I'm back here with my project of molding this custom Sportster frame. We started out with the frame sandblasted. We did our first application of plastic body filler. I sanded that by hand with 36. I showed you that. Now I'm back at this. At this point, it's been sanded with 36. Now I've got a glaze coat. I use Evercoat 417. I've used it for years. I just really like it. This is the product here. It literally will pour out of the can for you if you want it. You know what I mean? It's that liquid. So what this product does is it's really fine. It fills in all your fine scratches, little spots where you maybe have some pinholes or some low spots. And then you end up with this. Now this is what the surface looks like here. So what I'm going to do is I've got some 80 grit stick it roll sandpaper here. I've got a foam pad, and I make up a couple of things so I can sand with my hand, so I can sand it on this foam thing and use it to contour. So I'm going to set you back up here, and I'm just going to do a little sanding, and then I'll show you, what we've got and how it goes. And I'm going to wear a small pair of gloves here. It allows me to get a little bit better grip on the sandpaper and not tear my hands up so much. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sand my area and just try and get it smoothed out. There's no real easy way to do this. You're just sanding away. I'm going to see if I can zoom you in over here. So I am just gonna take the sandpaper and sand these areas. The thing that's nice about this glaze coat is it's very easy to sand. So your sanding goes pretty good, even though you're using this finer sandpaper, which is 80 grit that I'm using. It will sand pretty quick. This whole job is just, it's time and tedium. So when I say time and tedium, it's just like, it's tedious work. You can't get too crazy. You just got to let the sandpaper do the job, and you go along and you sand out all your low spots and sand down your high spots, blend them into your low spots, and then you end up with this nice area where this whole thing is blended together. So I'm not going to bore you with too much more of this, but you'll get the general idea. If you look at this now, as I sand it, you'll start to get what I'm going for. So I sand it in many different directions, and then, this is what I got. This is my area, so I start out with something that looks like this here, and then I sand it down to something that's nice and smooth, and it's going to blend into itself there. So I'm going to do that to the entire frame, and maybe touch up a few spots that might be low. Maybe, I might have some pinholing, some edges, or things like that I have to touch up. And then after that, it'll be basically, the whole frame will be ready to be primed. So I will continue to sand this whole thing. I'll give you a little view of what it looks like once I'm all done, and then we'll get it primed, and we'll go from there. Once it's primed, then your frame's all molded and you're ready for paint. So thanks a lot. Now I've got to the point where I've done all my glaze coat work with 80 grit paper. I'm down to the point where all the areas that I feel as though needed attention have attention. In this deal, my customer, my friend, whatever, he was concerned with everything from the lower portion of this frame up. So that when it's on, because it's going to be a really low bike, you're not really going to see the stuff on the bottom. It's got a very race theme to it, so it's not really like a show bike. It doesn't have to really be perfect. So what I did was I molded all this stuff here. If you remember in the previous part of the video, I knocked it down quick with 36, then I came back on it with some 80, then I put some glaze coat on it. Now I've got it, the glaze coat sanded. I've got a few spots where there was a couple of little divots, like a little, not really a pinhole, but like a low spot. So I left this one here for you so you could see what I got. I just got this little spot, so what I did was I went around, and I'm going to put you back over here. So what I did was I went around and I looked at it, really blew it off really good with some compressed air. I went around and I looked at every square inch of it really very closely with a pencil in my hand. And every time I found a spot that needed a little bit more putty or polyester glaze coat, whatever you want to call it, I made a little circle around that area. And I inspected all of my areas that I worked till I had it all done. And then I looked at what I had to fill in, and thought in my mind, say, okay, I need, you know, a golf ball size of the stuff, or a quarter, or whatever it may be. Then I came back and I touched up all those spots. So now I'm just going to let this dry. I'll come back on it with some 80. I'll knock those spots down, and then it'll be pretty much ready for primer. At that point, I'll go over it really good. I'll take all these sandblasted areas. I'll probably just run some sandpaper over it just to make sure to knock down any of the rough stuff. And then I'll treat it with an acid, and then I'll use my anti-corrosive primer to prime it, and then my high build primer. When I get to those steps, I'll come back on, I'll show you how to do it, and we'll move forward. Howdy folks, I'm back. Okay, so now what I've done is I sanded all my little touch-up areas, and then I went over the whole frame, inch by inch basically. I took my little die grinder, my Dremel tool. I cleaned out all my holes that I might have had any little scab of plastic filler or anything like that. I took care of that, took care of all my edges. I went over everything. Everything looks really good. I ran over the frame with a scuff pad just to knock off anything, you know, any debris or anything that was extra on there. Now I'm ready to go. So I'm going to wash this with a pre-cleaner. I'm going to mix up some anti-corrosive primer. You can use any kind you want, self-etching primer, anti-corrosive primer. It usually comes, it's green in color. Mix it per the instructions on the back. All you really got to do is cover it. The anti-corrosive primer is designed to bite to the metal, and then the primer can bite to that. So I'm going to put a coat of that on here. I'm going to let that flash. By the time I'm done cleaning out my gun and everything from the anti-corrosive primer, and then I'll mix some primer surfacer and put that in my gun. By the time I'm done with all of that, this primer, the anti-corrosive that was on my frame that I put on, will be flashed enough to accept the primer surfacer. I'll put 2 to 3 coats of the primer surfacer on there. We'll let that dry, we'll sand it, and we'll see what we got. Chances are, after that primer surface is on here, it'll be sanded, and then we can start thinking about what we're going to put on it for paint. I just wanted to give you a look so you could see where I'm at here. I mixed up my anti-corrosive primer. I've applied it to my frame. So now I got it all covered. I look under all the different angles and every which way to make sure that everything's covered. The most important thing with your anti-corrosive primer or etching primer is that you have all your bare metal surfaces covered. It's not like you need 2, 3, 4 coats of this stuff. It just has to be covered. This material bites to the steel and creates adhesion for your paint job. So I've definitely achieved that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to clean my gun out. I'm going to get my urethane primer surfacer mixed and ready to go in the gun. With the primer surfacer, I'm going to want to put 2 to 3 good coats on here, because that's going to provide my film build so I can sand this, fill in all my little sand scratches, nooks, crannies. This thing was pretty much bare metal, so there might be some grind marks in it from when we ground it and stretched it and welded it. So I'm going to work on getting all of that stuff buried, and the only way to do that is with the primer. So I'm going to go ahead, get this thing primed. Alrighty folks, okay, so I'm back on. What you see over here is, this is my urethane primer. I've applied it. I still got my paint clothes on. I got 3 good coats of a high build urethane primer on here. Just so happens to be this buff color. It comes like this, or it comes in red oxide, or it comes in gray, or you can tint it to whatever color you want. This is how it came. once this dries, I'm going to take a good look at it. I'll put some guide coat on it. In other words, I'll dust some, you know, like black, trim black, or whatever I got hanging around in a can that'll accent against this color here. I'll lay that on there, and then I'll probably, by the looks of it, I got some grind marks and stuff on here that that are from when the frame was altered. So I'm gonna have to fill those in. I really couldn't see them with the sandblasting. So now what's happened is a lot of the imperfections I couldn't see before, I'm definitely seeing now. So I will put a guide coat on here, and I'll sand this thing dry with probably 180 grit sandpaper. I'll put another couple of coats of primer on here, and then we'll be ready to paint. Here's my frame in the back. I primed it the first time, put a guide coat on it. I'm going to sand it today, and I'm going to re-prime it. Over here, I have my swing arm that I've been working on. I just got this one in primer. So now you can see here that I've got this primed up. I'm going to put some guide coat on this, and I'm going to get this sanded and ready to be re-primed. Now the reason I'm re-priming is because I've got some areas that really I'm not happy with. And what the primer will do is I get small areas of scratches, some spots like on the frame where it was sandblasted with some really rough steel shot that makes it kind of rough. Just imperfections. I mean, we're not talking about filling dents in with this stuff, but we're talking about filling in minor imperfections, scratches, things of that nature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a little guide coat to this, just like I did with my frame, and then I'm going to sand this. More than likely I'm going to sand this dry, so I don't have to worry about a lot of water, you know, all the nooks and crannies that I have to blow out. I'll probably sand this dry with 150 grit sandpaper. That way there, it'll take it down really quick, and my next application of primer will more than take care of anything that I got going on there. So basically what I'm going to do is guide coat it, hit it really good with some 150, take a look at it, make sure I don't have any areas that I might want to put some polyester glaze coat on if I have some major goobers that I discover. If not, boom, I'm going to apply another 2 to 3 coats of this high build urethane primer, and at that point we'll be ready for sanding and painting. I've got the House of Color paint is on order for this. It should be here hopefully by the end of the week. And we're going to go with an Oriental Blue Candy and some Orion Silver. We're also going to use some House of Color Blue Flake and some House of Color Silver Flake. So we're going to come up with a retro paint job for this Sportster as well. In the meantime, I do have some other tins that I'm getting ready to do another Sportster. This is going to be more of a stock type Sportster, but I've got the front and rear fender and the tank. I'm prepping at the same time that I'm doing this. So once I'm done with this project, I'm going to move on to that. That one I also ordered the paint on. That one's going to be purple. So I'm going to do purple with, I think, some really crazy metal flake flames on that. So that's a to be seen type of project, but I'll get back with you on that. So I'm going to get this sanded, and I'll come back to you and let you know how we made out and where we're at. Thanks. Back here with my molded frame project that I'm doing for New England Choppers. Just coming in to give you a little update, show you what I've been doing and where I'm at with the project. So at the last point, I had applied another application of primer like I have here on this swing arm. You'll see here is I had previously sanded it and reprimed it. This is the results. I put some guide coat on it. Now I have to sand this with 600, and then I'll be ready to put my sealer, my base coat sealer, or my candy on it. So I've got this. I still have to sand. This is my frame. I've sanded this frame with 600. What I'm going to do is I have a few spots in here where you can still see my guide coat, nooks and crannies. Higher frame with a scuff pad. Give it a really good look. Make sure that all of my areas that I've done my body work to all look really good, all up around here. I'm going to pay special attention to areas that I know are going to be focal points, are going to be seen. This area here, the area between the tank and the seat, I know that you're going to see. All this back around where the rear fender goes, that's all going to be very a big focal point. Down here by the wishbone where the engine is, and this front motor mount is going to be something you're really going to see. So I'm going to spend extra time looking that all over, making sure that everything's really quite right. Once I have that all set, and my swing arm's all sanded, what I'll do is I'll wash this all down and I'll blow it with compressed air, all my nooks and crannies and holes and everything. I'll get that all set. I'll wash this thing down with pre-cleaner 2 or 3 times. And I'll get it all, and then I'll get it positioned so we can start thinking about putting some sealer on it, silver sealer from House of Color, and then we can put our base candy on. So I'll get back with you when we're ready for that. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand that swing arm, and I'm also going to sand I have a test panel that I'm going to sand and apply that silver sealer to it. Then I can apply my candy base. The frame is going to be Oriental Blue with Oriental Blue candy, and I'm going to do some blue metal flake on that, on top of that. That's going to be the frame. The tank is going to be mostly blue, but down the fender, the center of the tank, and the center of the rear fender is going to be a triple silver, like racing stripe. That's also going to be, it's going to be Orion silver with a silver metal flake in it. So I'm going to do a spray out on a panel that I'll prep so I can see exactly what the results are going to be, so I can tweak my techniques. The thing that's really cool about the House of Color product line is it's pretty much infinite the different things you can do. Depending upon the base you use, the candy you use, when you put flake on, how many coats of candy, how much flake, it's just a myriad of different ways to do it. So what I want to do is I want to fine-tune the specific technique I want to use before I start putting any material on my project. That way there, if I want to do something different, I just change it up, try a little something different on my test panel, until I get to exactly what I want. Then I know. I say, okay, I'm going to use this base, I'm going to use this candy, I'm going to use this many coats of it, I'm going to use this much flake, I'm going to use this many coats of the flake, and that will give me that same result. So basically it gives me like a little roadmap of exactly the steps and techniques I'm going to use to reproduce what I want. So I'm going to get to work on that stuff. I'll bring you back on, and I'll show you what I got going on. Thanks.